response speaker, who is Mr. Benito. Please welcome me to introduce him. He is an agricultural economist and human ecologist based in Pretoria, South Africa. He has over 20 years of experience in developing managerial and governance capacities and working with farmers' organizations in the country. So please welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Flora, and thank you, Dr. Dishuta. Indeed, if we approach the subject from the rights point of view, and it's clear from the presentation that we have had that all the people have the right to benefit from any social protection intervention. And my response will be basically on the constituency that we work with, and these are farmers and also farm laborers. They can be immigrants within their respective countries, or immigrants who cross the borders to work in other countries. In most cases, their vulnerability is not exposed by a crisis. They are already a vulnerable group of people. But unfortunately, when the crisis comes in, they are also isolated from the benefits of social protection due to various reasons, and some of them because they are not documented, and some, if they are moving from district A to district B in their respective countries, it's because they don't belong to the communities where they found themselves or they find themselves working. As a result, they are isolated, and I call this systematic exclusion because of the approach and the packages that are in place to address the social protection initiatives. So my response will be based on what role can farmer organizations play to bridge the gap, to ensure that those people that are already vulnerable and their vulnerability increases during crisis are also benefiting, and they are assisted for them to come out of the crisis and for them to also improve in their livelihoods. But before I do that, I think it would be good for me just to share with you that farmer organizations, they are unique entities or institutions in terms of their structures, because they are structured from the local level in the villages, going up to the district, country, and region, up to the continental level. So this uniqueness places the farmer organizations in a situation that they can really assist in any program because they are in touch with those vulnerable groups. And also, they are not rigid structures. We have experienced or seen how farmer organizations evolve to respond to the needs. And I'll give examples in terms of how farmer organizations have responded to the needs during the COVID and the role that farmer organizations have played. But also it's important for us to acknowledge that farmer organizations are not homogeneous. There are specific groups that have specific mandates, and these mandates can be applied in different situations when we are talking of social protection initiatives. And in most cases, farmer organizations have that mandate of empowering the vulnerable communities for them to be able to come out of crisis and to sustain their livelihoods after crisis. So we have that role of facilitation. Then, before I go to the what can farm organizations do in social protection, I want just to share with you what we have done during COVID. And it was unimaginable some few months ago that farmer organizations are going to be involved in dealing with health-related issues. We can go to the next slide. In dealing with health-related issues. But we have seen, because of the need that was there and because of the gap in terms of the information that was going to farmer organizations or to farmers or to rural communities, farmer organizations had no choice but to go into an arena that was not traditionally their mandate. For example, most of the farmer organizations were involved in providing of personal protective equipment to farmers. They were engaged in providing information, health-related information to farmers, because these communities were neglected and farmers' organizations had to jump in. And we found that we were involved in even doing analysis in terms of the impact of COVID, for example, in the communities that were not reached, in the communities that were forgotten, in the communities that were not in the radar of decision makers. So farmer organizations were involved in going there and do analysis and then present this analysis to decision makers. In some instances, we succeeded, but in most instances, we did not, because I think even the policymakers were overwhelmed in terms of what was required on the ground. And also in some instances, farmer organizations had to engage with authorities. And these are not only public authorities, but institutions that were there to help during the COVID. And when we engaged with them, we had to present the situation, and we had to present papers in terms of what is going on, and also develop opinion papers in terms of what we think should be done to address those people that are vulnerable, but they are forgotten systematically because they might not be in the radar of decision makers. And also, we were responsible of disseminating information to create awareness to those that were not reached. As you remember, when the COVID just came in, there was a lot of information. Some was not, it was fake, and others even brought about fears and founded fears to communities. But it was the responsibility of farm organizations, because of their structures that they are on the ground, to give the communities proper information. And we needed to get this information from somewhere. You can go to the next slide. Then, what can be done in terms of farmer organizations assisting in designing proper social protection interventions that can reach to those vulnerable that are forgotten? I will speak of few things, but the list is not exhaustive. But the first thing and the foremost thing is, because farmer organizations are staying with these communities. If you look at the informal sector in terms of laborers at farm level, most of the employers who are farmers themselves, they are part and parcel of farmer organizations. And they're the ones who interact with these laborers, these undocumented laborers. And using the structures that farmer organizations have, where these people participate, we can assist in the development of an intervention that is going to reach out to those that are vulnerable but are systematically excluded. One, farm organizations can assist in answering the basic questions in designing programs that are there to intervene during crisis. And these questions are like, what is the actual problem? Because in most cases, there is a crisis. Of course, you need to address that crisis. There are immediate needs for that particular crisis. But for the vulnerable or for the affected to come out of that crisis, you might also need to address some fundamental problems. So the question that we can assist in addressing through consultation with the constituencies that we have is, what is the actual problem that needs to be addressed? And I always say, let us not assume that we know the problem and come up with interventions before we consult properly with the affected. Number two, who are the vulnerables? And as I said, there are others that are perpetually vulnerable. And COVID might just come as one of the challenges that they have, but their life is already vulnerable. How do we reach them? Because they are not formally recognized, but they are there and they are struggling and they are suffering. How do we reach them? Farmer organizations, I believe, they can play that role because their structures are right down in the communities. And this will assist us in not applying one-size-fits-all solutions, because these also are the solutions that we just look at people and say, this is the solution for them. But different categories of people, different categories of farmers, different categories of farm workers, they might need different interventions. So all that farm organizations can assist in getting. Then the question of when. Sometimes you come with a solution while the problem has shifted or it has changed or it has evolved into something else. So farm organizations, because they are there on the ground, they'll be able to provide in terms of what is required to be addressed. And this also calls for preparedness, because when a crisis comes, you need to react swiftly. So what preparedness plans do we have in place? And are these preparedness plans inclusive enough? Farm organizations can assist in that. And the last one is how. How do we reach out? What is the appropriate intervention? We have worked with farmers, we have worked with communities, we have worked with farm laborers, we have worked with tenants, and we know what they need and how intervention can go to them. I liked the keynote address. When you look at the needs are so many. They need their children to go to school. They need proper health facilities. But if you just come up with a single intervention without addressing the other things, then that intervention might not result into the intended objective. We can go to the other slide. Then farm organizations, they can, as I said, facilitate in terms of consultation with beneficiaries, those who are affected, and coming up with the solution. And they can also assist in setting up success indicators for social protection interventions. Sometimes we set indicators that are basically looking at the amount of money or the amount of funds that has been spent. But I like what the keynote address has also put forward to say, when you see the amounts being announced or pronounced, it doesn't show you the impact of those.
Mr. Benito, you are out of time. If you can please just wind up right there, please.
Okay, thank you so much. So in short, what I'm saying is that farmer organizations, they have critical structures for entry in terms of designing, implementing, assessing, and evaluating the impact of social protection measures. And this role we are going to play, and we believe that if we play this role, there is going to be a stabilization, resilience building, and quick recovery in terms of crisis.